Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about narcissistic abuse and what that looks like. Excuse me. So it's going to be all around the different types of behaviours narcissists use to control, manipulate, abuse, how they just destroy your, what's your sense of self, and kind of do it by a drip feed. And narcissistic abuse is horrendous, and the reason I'm doing it today is because I've got, I finished my 5th chapter of the MA, which, it's the last one, and now I'm on to my discussion. So the 5th chapter was all about the different types of abuse. So here we go. I've had some really brilliant feedback as well, actually, that I'm going to try really hard to adhere to, and that has been around me answering questions and kind of jumping backwards and forwards between questions. So what I'm going to try and do is, if you ask a question, I'll get round to it. What I will do is I'm going to say what the question is, answer it, and then move on to the next one. I'll probably not react as much as I normally do with sort of saying hello and stuff, but I'll do my best. We'll see what happens. But I'm really grateful for feedback, and if you've got any, please send it through. I'm not precious about it. I won't be offended. I really need the feedback because it obviously helps me then get better at doing this and just get better. So improve and give what you guys need and want. So narcissistic abuse, there are loads of different techniques. When we talk about emotional abuse, I've got, just so you know, I've got the chapter that I'm talking about up here so that I can remind myself. So when we talk about emotional abuse, it's anything that basically leads somebody to be controlled, or anything that means that somebody isn't reacting or behaving in the way that they would normally in a normal interaction with someone. It's when somebody manages their emotions and behaviours in order not to trigger anything from the narcissist or anybody really. But emotional abuse is sustained control, shaming, put downs, I hope people kind of know what that means about being emotionally abused. There is a World Health Organization definition of it, and it's all around the inhibiting of somebody's behaviour. Control, financial control is one as well. Physical, material, emotional abuse. It's insidious. And the problem with it is, the biggest problem is that when you're being emotionally abused, or when you're in a relationship where it's emotionally abusive, you probably aren't aware that that's what's happening. And it's not until you're a lot further down the line that suddenly you're aware that you are being abused or controlled. Or, God, look, I'm sorry, I haven't even brushed my hair today. Let's get started. So the main thing that people talk about when they talk about narcissistic abuse is probably gaslighting. And gaslighting, I've talked about it before. I think I talked about it on the other AMA. Gaslighting is where it's named after a 1940s play called Gaslight, and which was then subsequently made into a film. Most people think it's the film, but actually it was a play first. In the play or film, the husband was basically trying to make his wife look or sound crazy, or feel crazy, by suggesting she was imagining things that weren't happening. And the actual gaslight bit of it comes from, he had murdered the woman in the flat above theirs, and when he murdered them, and then he was going up to steal the jewels, and when he was stealing the jewels, he was turning on lights, and obviously it was gas lights back then. He was turning on lights which were making the lights in their flat dim, and when his wife mentioned that the lights were dimming, he said, well, you must be imagining it. There's something wrong with you. You're imagining it, to try and cover up what he was doing. So gaslighting is about protecting and defending the narcissist's behaviour, rejecting any responsibility for anything, and used as a psychological warfare, really, to manipulate and control, and it leads somebody to question everything that they know. Let me see. Basically, gaslighting might be where an event happens and you, as the individual victim, are, slightly uncomfortable with the word victim, but you as the victim might say, hey, I didn't really like it when you spoke to me in that way. And their response is, oh my God, you're overreacting. You're so emotional. You always do this. You're absolutely crazy. Oh my God, you're psychotic. Things like you're being paranoid. Things like, just that it didn't happen that way. You're imagining things. There's a really horrible phrase that narcissists use all the time, and that is that when you say to somebody, you really upset me, as by way of an apology, a narcissist will say, target, yeah, a narcissist, thanks Sharon, maybe, sorry, no, see, that's why I get distracted. Right, so gaslighting, when you say to a narcissist, you did this, rather than taking responsibility, what they'll do is really clever and say, oh, I'm sorry you feel like that, I didn't mean it, it wasn't my intention. And what it sounds like an apology, doesn't it? It sounds like they're saying sorry, but actually what they're saying is, I'm sorry you feel that way, therefore it's your feeling, and you are responsible for it. It wasn't my intention, thereby absolving them of all responsibility because they don't, because it's your fault you feel that way and you've taken it that way. Does that make sense? So when you are being gaslit, you are questioning things, you're questioning your own perception, your own judgment, your own understanding, you're responding and being told that you're crazy or you're overreacting, you're over emotional, that you shouldn't be responding that way. I mean, you know, I can think of an example where somebody I know caught their partner cheating, said to the partner, oh my God, you're cheating. No, you're overreacting. I wasn't cheating. You're imagining things. You know, just really dismissive, really undervaluing, really, devaluing, really undermining. So it makes you feel like you're not, you're not sane. And it makes you question everything you know. And it's constant. A narcissist will do this constantly, and you end up being a shell because you don't know what you know, because you're constantly being told what you know is wrong. Does that make sense? So another narcissistic sort of abuse or abusive narcissistic behaviour is something around what's called the narcissistic supply. The narcissistic supply, it comes from a term that was introduced by a guy called Otto Fenichel, who was a psychoanalyst in 1938. And he uses it to describe the narcissist's behaviour which fulfills a need to control or be supplied by the drama, attention, admiration, sustenance. So narcissistic supply, there's a cycle in narcissistic abuse which is idealization, devaluing and discard. So that's how it works. So when you get into a relationship with a narcissist, what they'll do, and I'm talking about adult relationship, not parental ones, although this happens constantly in parentals. So the idealization stage comes from, starts out with, in an adult relationship, with the narcissist telling you how amazing you are, how beautiful you are, how special you are, how you're the only one. They're basically just constantly this massive, intensity, and you're being idolized and idealized, and he's or she is projecting all these things onto you about how you are the one that will save them, fix them, they've never felt like this before, that you're everything. And what they do then is start the gaslighting, which is the devaluing. So they start kind of little criticisms, little digs, little underminings that start making you go, oh, did that happen? But then they might go back to the idolizing again. So they flip it. But what they do is the supply thing is about, they hop. When they get, let me try and work this out properly so I'm explaining it best. Kernberg says that anybody who does not supply a narcissist with their supply, where he doesn't provide a narcissist with narcissistic supply, admiration, idolization, or interpersonal support that fulfills this need for being centre of attention and the centre of everybody's world. When the narcissist is not getting that, that's when they'd start doing what's called the discard. And the discard is used, well, basically it's what you want them to do if you're trying to get out of a relationship. So when you go to grey rock method, that's what you're trying to provoke, is the discard. So you're trying to get them to go, you're not giving me what I need, so I'm going to just let go of you. The problem with that is that they then start hoovering you. And hoovering is checking out whether or not you are able to be sucked back in to give them the narcissistic supply. So hoovering looks like they might send you flowers, they might send you something that you feel like you have to say thank you for, like a gift. They might send you a message that's, I'm just thinking about the good times and how great it was between us. And they're basically hoovering you, trying to provoke a connection, trying to provoke a reaction, but of a good kind. So it's not negative, it's positive hoovering. It's sucking you back in. They might actually, having said that, it might be negative. It might be something along the lines of, you are, oh, sorry, I thought that was on mute. It might be along the lines of sucking you back in through, I've heard that you're really struggling and I told you it would be like that. So try and get you to defend it. So basically, they're trying always, it's all about the narcissistic supply, where they are trying to be the centre of everything all the time. Admiration, interpersonal support, idolization, and sustenance, attention. That's what all of these behaviours are about, fulfilling the narcissistic supply. So hoovering is when a client, I've just read that off the thing. When a person, a partner or a child breaks free from the abusive cycle and the narcissist, hoovering is used to try and suck them back in. And the length of time could be really, really long. So it could be years, it could be ages, and then you get a message saying, I really miss you, and I've been thinking about us, and weren't we great when we were together, and blah, blah, blah. And it just gets you, it tries to hook you back in. I wrote a little example about this, and I'm just going to read it to you. I hope you don't mind. This was an example, which was, Stacey had an argument with her father 3 months ago. As a result of the argument, Stacey decided to sever all contact and not engage with either parent. This evening, Stacey's father sent Stacey a new mobile phone accompanied by a note saying, I hope this is the model you wanted, with a question mark. Love you, Dad. Stacey now feels that she should be thanking her father for such a generous gift, but realises this will initiate contact with him, which makes her feel uncomfortable and distressed. Stacey wishes that he had never sent the phone. So that's a really good example of, that's really arrogant, sorry. It's a good example of hoovering, because what he's done is, he's not said, would you like the phone? He's not given her any kind of choice in the matter. He's just sent it. It's ignored her boundary, which is that there's no communication. He's sent something so big and generous that it's something that warrants an acknowledgement, or at least being sent back, because the receiver would likely feel some kind of guilt around keeping it and not responding, or keeping it, and maybe they want it, and you get sent a brand new nice shiny phone, and how hard is that to say, actually I'm not going to have it? It's difficult. So so hoovering is putting you back into a relationship, putting you back into narcissistic supply, testing your boundaries. So if you're in a situation where you're being hoovered, you essentially it's just don't respond, don't engage. Even things like suicide threats, things like I can't go on without you, all those things are called hoovering behaviours. So Lara has asked, even if the ex-partner has moved on with someone else, do they still hoover? Yep, absolutely. Just a narcissist isn't bothered about being faithful, isn't bothered about anything, and it may even be when the new supply, as it's called in the circles, the new supply as a new girlfriend might be losing the ability to keep fulfilling the need for narcissistic supply. So the narcissist is starting to lose interest and is trying to find supply from somewhere else, and they'll definitely go back. They'll find you, try and reconnect with you, try and re-engage you with their behaviour. So hoovering, you want to be on guard with it forever from it, just a little bit. Obviously don't be too hypervigilant, but if you have managed to escape the narcissist, unless they've been in intensive therapy, it's probably not going to be changed. So that's hoovering. I've done gaslighting. Let's talk about stonewalling. Stonewalling, also called or could be described as the silent treatment, is a very effective way again of hoovering you back in, of getting you back, of controlling you, of controlling the input output of the communication between you and the narcissist. So certainly with a narcissistic parent, and in fact in adult relationships as well. There's a guy called John Gottman who wrote a book which name I've forgotten. I think it's something like The 4 Horses of the Apocalypse, and it's about the breakdown of relationships and how there are 4 things that predict the breakdown of relationships, and one of those things is stonewalling. And what it is where in a big picture way, it's where they just refuse to engage with you at all, and so you're kind of having to beg them to engage. And it's what was I just thinking of? Stonewalling is either big picture or it's just little picture, like, hey, look at this, isn't this cool? And they're just, yeah, okay. And give you no engagement. They don't validate your enjoyment. They don't engage with your enjoyment. They take your wind out of your sails around stuff. So stonewalling, or the silent treatment, is all about control of communication. Interestingly, John Gottman says it's often used by men in adult relationships, but actually, clinically, I've found that it's equal in terms of mothers or fathers. In fact, more often I see it with mothers doing it to their children. But it's all about trying to get submissiveness and compliance. And control. So, if you imagine if you go up to someone, you're like, oh, look at this is so exciting, look, and they just go, that's so shaming. Immediately you feel like you've been over emotional, perhaps. You don't necessarily, obviously I'm assuming quite a lot, but you might feel that you've been really over emotional, overreactive. You might feel silly, you might feel shamed, embarrassed, humiliated, because they're not engaging with your emotion and your enjoyment, your excitement. They've dismissed it and diminished it immediately and replaced it with shame. So you can see how it's quite effective at controlling you, and that the child of a narcissist is particularly at risk of stonewalling because they've grown up in this environment where this is normal behaviour for them. The child of the narcissist will suppress their emotion to allow the parent to tell them what the real emotion they should be having is. And so stonewalling is really effective because they know that if I comply, if I do what the narcissist wants, then I will get back the engagement or the attachment relationship. And as we spoke about attachment the other day, it's really important. The attachment relationship as a child is vital and literally the only thing that is really important to a child's well-being, in my opinion. I think there's different theories, obviously, but that's how I feel. So stonewalling works very effectively with children because they will do anything they can to preserve that attachment relationship, including suppressing and dismissing their own emotions. So if you Google stonewalling, there's so much literature on it online in terms of blogs and things, but in terms of academic literature there's really very little, which has been really difficult because I have to explain everything. So let's talk about family roles. Family roles in narcissistic abuse are really difficult. So there's something called projective identification, and that is where one person projects all their own self-hatred or self-love onto one person. And golden child and scapegoat are two child roles in a family. There are more, lost child and invisible child, which are kind of the same thing, but I don't really see a lot about the lost child. I think I've only ever come across it once, but it does happen. But the child is sort of almost ignored when they're the lost child. But the two big ones are the golden child and the scapegoat, and the problem with that is that they're pitted against each other. So with the golden child, the parent projects their identification, so projective identification of their goodness and their things that they like about themselves, or things they wish they were, onto the golden child. And the golden child then becomes what it says, like it does what it says on the tin. They become the one who is admired, respected, is given everything and made excuses for, is protected against any blame, mistaking. It's basically don't have to have any responsibility or accountability for their behaviour, and they are left it's actually just as damaging as being a scapegoat, in some ways more, because when a golden child is in that system, they've got less chance of waking up to the behaviour, because actually they become very enmeshed in it, because they're treated well in it. They if they're treated well in it, they don't want to break out of it. Lara's asked, what if the golden child doesn't fulfil the expectations? Well, so the roles can swap now and again. When the golden child doesn't fulfill expectations, usually they're made excuses for. Sometimes the roles swap, but generally it's like you're a majority golden child, an occasional scapegoat, and majority scapegoat, and it's not an equal balance of swapping. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I'm seeing so far, but obviously more research into that. But the golden child, if they don't fulfill expectations, you know what, I know of golden children who are chronic alcoholics, drug abusers, drug dealers, criminals, and they're just excuse their behaviour. It's not their fault, it's because this, there was a teacher in year 3 that was mean to them, or they had a horrible time, or their ex-partner was so vile, and so it's justified, the behaviour's justified. So that's what happens when the golden child doesn't fulfil expectations, generally, that they get excused their behaviour. So the golden child, let me just having a look. So they it's basically favouritism, and it's again used to control, and actually the golden child generally becomes really compliant because they need to keep fulfilling whatever the projections are on them, certainly as children, to maintain their position as golden child. So I suspect on some level there's an awareness, whether or not it's conscious or not, I don't know. So they justify their own behaviour, or does the narcissistic parent make up excuses too? That's all right, Lara. Because it's within the remit, I'm answering. I don't know if you saw at the beginning that I'm trying to answer questions kind of at the end of sections. So I'm going to answer this now though, because that is relevant. They justify their own behaviour, or does the narcissistic parent make up excuses? Oh no, the narcissistic parent will excuse them. They'll make all the excuses under the sun, and then it's like a codependency almost, where well, mum says it's all right, so I must be all right. Do you know when there's that song, they told me to go to rehab? That's all right. No, Lara, please keep asking questions. I don't want you to stop asking questions. It's just that I'm going to answer them. I won't maybe answer straight away. That's all right. So please keep asking, because they're great. They're good questions. You know the song Rehab? My daddy said there's a line in it where my daddy says I'm okay. Well, because daddy says I'm okay, and I don't need to go to rehab. Well, I mean, Amy Winehouse in herself is an absolute, I don't know whether she was a narcissist or not, I wouldn't ever dream of suggesting that, but what the behaviour is the enabling behaviour. So the enabling is what the narcissist does for the golden child, and the golden child does for the narcissist. And so does a spouse do for a narcissistic parent too. If there's a married couple in the spousal relationship, one may well both be narcissists, unusual, and also probably extremely dysfunctional and violent, outbursty relationship, but also the spouse will become an enabler as well. So it's all about everyone is always in a family system, and in narcissistic abuse, it's all about helping the narcissist keep the construct of themselves in place. So anybody that threatens that, i.e. the scapegoat child, will become, anyone that threatens that will be devalued, criticised, smear campaigned, all sorts of awful behaviour will be pitted against them as a result of their stepping out of the family system, which helps hold up that construct. Sorry, does that make sense? I'm quite tired, sorry. So that is the golden child. So let's talk briefly about the scapegoat. It's usually the scapegoat who comes to therapy. It's usually the scapegoat who kind of goes, actually, this is really wrong. For a long time, they might not realise it. I know, certainly in online groups and forums, that people have been in their 60s before realising that they've been scapegoated all their life. And that's so unbearably sad that people have lived fulfilling this role of what all the negative things that the narcissist holds about themselves. So it's projective identification, what's put onto the child, and indeed partners, ex-partners. So with a narcissistic adult relationship, the narcissistic partner, the narcissist will say that the ex-partner are all these awful things, when in fact it's probably them that's doing all that, and they're saying things about the ex that actually is more about them. But in a family, the scapegoat, sometimes it's referred to as the rebellious child, but I really dislike that term just because it seems like it puts the blame, so it feels like victim blaming, because rebellion means that you're fighting negatively against something, doesn't it? Usually I'm rebelling against something. It's not seen as a positive thing. So rebellious feels, victim blaming. So I prefer scapegoat just because it's done to them, it's not them doing it to others. Does that make sense? So scapegoat, again, projective identification. They're blamed for everything that goes wrong. The scapegoat is blamed for all family arguments, all family discourse or dysfunction. It's your fault. It's the black sheep syndrome. Being a scapegoat, you are victim of smear campaigns, because you're more likely to be the one that says, I'm not okay with being treated like this, I don't like the way I'm spoken to. You're more likely to be the one that wants to put a boundary in and tell the narcissist, no, you can't do that, you can't speak to me like that. You're more likely to be excluded, isolated, vilified. You'll be accused of having mental health issues. You'll be held responsible for all the negative things, and it's awful. It's really horrible. It's properly emotionally abusive. You're constantly being constantly being shamed, put down, humiliated. You're constantly being criticised. You're not meeting enough. You're never good enough. You can never do anything that's good enough. Please feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer any of them. I just might not get to them straight away. So being a scapegoat is kind of it's a double-edged sword, because you are, is that the right phrase? You are kind of aware of the abuse, but also being abused so badly that it's hard to break out of that. And one of the things that they say about projective identification, when a parent does that to a child, it almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you keep telling someone you're naughty, you're bad, you're selfish, you're self-centered, they then may end up becoming those things. Your life's going to be a waste. You're going, the things that get said are vile, and the narcissist narcissistic parent will constantly shame, berate, and project all their own self-hatred onto this child, this poor little kid who's actually probably really just a regular kid, but being told all the time that they're bad and naughty. And the really awful thing about that is that people collude in it. So if you've grown up as a scapegoat, it may be that your whole family believes that you're a waste of space, or your life's going nowhere, or you just make mistakes all the time, whereas in fact you probably just make a regular amount of mistakes. It's just that you're berated more for them. And the golden child is obviously not allowed to make mistakes because they're the golden child, so they never do. So you're compared to them all the time, and you know, it's horrible. And in narcissistic family system, what they do is pit children against each other rather than encourage closeness. It's pitting them against each other, because if they were close, they might collude and expose the abuse and behaviour. So that's scapegoating. The good news about being a scapegoat is you're more likely to get help and get some sort of recovery and remove yourself from the toxic family system. So you're more likely to be okay in the end and have a healthy life if you get into therapy or do loads of self-help stuff and work. Lara, could you be a scapegoat in one relationship and then maybe take on a different role in a different relationship, or is this just family related? Do you mean, if you mean in an adult relationship, I suppose, yeah, I don't see why not. I suppose, I think I need that question a bit clearer in what kind of relationship you mean. But yeah, I imagine if you are in an adult relationship and with a narcissist and then you break up, the adult relationship, you become the scapegoat for the narcissist. Does that make sense? So that you are then blamed for why everything's gone wrong. You're blamed for the breakdown. You're blamed for why they can't see their children. You're blamed as to why they haven't got a good job or money or whatever it is. It's all your fault, nothing to do with them. So it's a really big red flag, actually. If you're going out into the dating world and you start dating somebody and they blame their ex for all their problems or the reason everything broke down, or even their own behaviour of cheating or whatever, it's big red flags. And when they don't take responsibility, you need to kind of start questioning that, let a little alarm bell go off and see, so see if you are recognising that there's no responsibility taken, just take that really loud and clear as an alarm bell. If you're a scapegoat all your life, how will that affect future relationships? Yeah, so yeah, it will, because your ability to relate to people is based on what you're taught as a child. So if you've been taught that you're the reason everything goes wrong, as you get into adult relationships, if you haven't corrected that through therapy or whatever other methods you might use, you're likely to continue playing that role unless you've got someone who's very sort of insightful and aware and empathetic and able to say, no, it's not your fault. So yeah, if you're a scapegoat, you're more likely to let that pattern repeat, but not, but the good thing is that it can be broken. Whereas the golden child is more likely to be more abusive towards their partners because they expect to be right and forgiven and not take responsibility all the time. The scapegoat are more likely to be victims of abuse, I think. Again, there's no research on this, and maybe I'll do it one day, I hope I will, but maybe it's something that I can see kind of making sense, that because we believe as therapists that we repeat the patterns that we're taught because it makes us feel safe, if we're taught all the time that it's our fault that things have gone wrong, then we're more likely to take responsibility when it's not our fault. Does that make sense? Or if we've been constantly exposed to narcissistic abuse and say something like you get the train time wrong, and you would, in your previous relationship with a narcissist, they would have screamed abuse at you for that. in the next relationship you might expect the abuse, and then when it doesn't come, be really confused by it. And that does happen, obviously, because not everyone is a narcissist, thank God. But yeah, if you're a scapegoat, you're more likely to put yourself in a position by accident of being scapegoated in your adult relationships. But the hope is that the good thing is that you can change that. It's just creating awareness and creating, as always, flipping boundaries. You just get those boundaries really rigid. Start working out what you're actually responsible for and what you're not, and you can change that. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about flying monkeys. Flying monkeys is a term created from by a guy called Bowen. Well, no, it's not. Sorry, he did triangulation. Flying monkeys obviously comes from the Wizard of Oz and refers to the Wicked Witches of the West, who used to send her flying monkeys out to find out where Dorothy and the gang were, so that she had information about them so she could plan her attack. I mean, if you've been in a narcissistic system or with a relationship, you can probably really relate to that. The flying monkey is somebody who is doing the narcissist's bidding. They are gleaning information to be fed back to the narcissist. And it's really difficult because the narcissist is so clever at mining this information that the person giving it to them might not even see the harm. And the only way to deal with this is completely grey rock them. Learn that. Make sure you tell people if they've got contact with the narcissistic parent or ex-partner. Make sure you'll make them really conscious of the fact that you don't want this information being passed back, and give them one chance. And if they fail to respect that boundary for you, they're a flying monkey, and you need to really boundary them and what you tell them, and imagine that everything that you say to them will go back to the narcissist. Making sure that you are boundaried is the biggest and most important way to deal with narcissistic abuse. The flying monkey attacks come from nowhere. You don't know that they're coming. They can be siblings, they can be friends, they can be aunts, family members, cousins, uncles. Bye Lara, thanks for watching. The flying monkeys are everywhere potentially, and you have to really get used to looking out for them. It sucks. I really hate that I'm sort of asking you to be responsible for somebody else's behaviour in this, but what it is that you've got to defend yourself and you've got to protect yourself, and you must make sure that anything that you're saying is not, you don't care if the narcissist knows. Does that make sense? So a flying monkey is triangulation, is what it comes from, is the actual psychological term. And triangulation is used to control control the flow or control the interpretation of information that's coming in or out. So triangulation is where person A tells person B that person C has annoyed them. Rather than going directly to person C or going to person B and saying, oh, did you hear that person C said something nasty about you? Or do you know what person C is up to? It's about controlling and dominating, and the interpretation and the input and output of information. It's a nasty little behaviour, and it's very, very cleverly done. It's a kind of divide and conquer tactic, triangulation. It's all about allowing the narcissist to control. And so the other thing that it does is it sort of allows the narcissist to avoid coming into direct conflict with anybody else. So when there's when somebody is triangulating, what they're trying to do is remain distant from the conflict but dominate it and control it too. So triangulation is really nasty, obviously. It keeps the narcissist at the centre. So at the beginning we were talking about something called narcissistic supply, and narcissistic supply everything is about feeding the supply, and the narcissists need to be the centre of everything, and the attention, the admiration or the pity, but it's just about getting all their needs met, which are unrealistic, unhealthy needs around their self-worth self-image by using all these different tactics to keep fulfilling that. So triangulation is a really big one. If someone's not coming to you directly and saying you've upset me, but going to somebody else and saying Helen's upset me, they are triangulating you, because it's that kind of talking behind your back thing. It's nasty, isn't it? How do you feel when someone, if person B comes up to you and says, oh, person A has said that you were really nasty at the picnic and they didn't like the way you spoke to them? Well, what are you meant to do with that? How are you meant to respond to that? You've got no way of doing it because they've not come to you directly. So not only have they've smear campaigned you by gossiping and bitching about you, for want of a better word, to somebody else, but they're also not giving you a right to reply. So they're not allowing you the chance to resolve it with them directly. They're using it as an opportunity to smear you and also control what people say or think about you. It's horrible stuff. Oh, there we go. Audrey has asked, it's taken me 53 years to realise I was a scapegoat. Went no contact, which I wasn't asked, she said. Went no contact going on 2 years, but I'm now dealing with the aftermath of a smear campaign. Oh, Audrey, I am so sorry to hear that. That is so hard. When we're in a smear campaign, the only thing we can do is boundary ourselves, protect ourselves, remove contact, stop trying to justify ourselves or explain ourselves or tell other people the truth. We just have to step back and let it happen and let those people that are engaged with the narcissist kind of fall away from our lives, because you're not going to convince them. It might happen eventually, but in the moment it won't happen. You're going to have to step away, allow everything to kind of die down, and just let time prove that the things that are being said about you are wrong and not true, and that you are not a bad person, not doing the things that they've been said. Just keep your evidence. Ask people when they say things to you, well, where's the evidence for that? Why would you think that about me? How does it help you not to talk to me about that when you've just taken their word for it? Smear campaigns are vile and really difficult, and really the only thing you can do is just stay away and block and remove contact and access to any of your information. So get that grey rock method going and respond in a very bounded way to everything that's coming at you. But yeah, horrible behaviour. So we've done... Oh, we haven't talked about parentification. Parentification is done in narcissistic families. It's a type of narcissistic abuse. It's the two types of parentification. We've got emotional parentification or instrumental parentification. There's a study that shows, there's quite a few studies that show that instrumental parentification is not as damaging as emotional parentification. Instrumental parentification is where a child is asked to do more than is appropriate for them at their age, whatever it is, in terms of chores around the house and helping out. So a child should not be cleaning a house top to bottom, or doing all the laundry, or putting laundry away, or hoovering every day. You might get them to load and unload a dishwasher, but you don't need to. They shouldn't be scrubbing floors. That's not appropriate for a child to do. You might say part of life skills is teaching them how to do stuff like that, but they're not responsible for it. It's not entirely their job. Does it make sense? So there's a level where it's inappropriate, and that's instrumental parentification. Emotional parentification is where a child is pulled into a role of parenting their own parent. It's an inappropriate boundaried relationship. So the child might become a confidant, is made responsible for siblings maybe, becomes a parent's carer, is looked to for emotional support, which is entirely inappropriate for children. A child should not be asked to give their parents emotional support in the way that you might ask an adult for it. There's one thing saying, oh, gives a cuddle, and there's another thing saying, oh, I need to talk to you, or there's levels of emotional relationship with your child, and emotional parentification is really damaging. It causes depression, anxiety. It teaches a child there's a much higher level of empathy an attunement, and the attunement is the important thing. In a child with of emotional parentification, who's grown up in emotional parentification, their attunement level's a lot higher because they start learning to predict the emotional needs of their parent, which is really unhealthy. Yeah, it's great to be empathetic, but there's a level where you start being so empathetic that your own emotional responses and landscape is diminished and suppressed because you're predicting how other people feel and you're caring about how other people feel all the time and too much. So it's really, really damaging. And the other thing it does is, we talked about attachment last time and the sense of self. We're trying always to give our children a really good sense of self so that they have their own set of boundaries and rules and ideals, and the parentified child will lose that identity and they will shape it to fit in with their parent's identity or the identity the parent wants them to have. So again, this is all about development for a child. All these things that I've talked about attachment and about all these behaviours within the family, like the scapegoat role and the golden child role as well. It's easy to forget that the golden child is actually a victim too. I think because I have so much contact with scapegoats, it tends to be that you can lose sight of the idea that a golden child is also really damaged too and cheated of their life too, but in a really different way. And it can be very difficult for a scapegoat and naturally to understand or feel like the golden child has struggles too, but usually they're so enmeshed and codependent on the parent, they don't have their own identity either. So everything is about creating the sense of self and creating a good robust set of boundaries for a child, and the parentification cheats them of that. Sharon's got a question. Was the child empathetic and so easy prey to become parentified, or does parentification cause the child's empathy so the child can fulfill the role? No, the parentification causes the child's empathy so that I don't quite know what the science is or if there is science behind it, but our levels of empathy there's a part of our brain that does it. I know that. And in fact, there's cognitive and there's relative empathy. Cognitive empathy is the way that we predict or understand how somebody might react in any given set of circumstances. We could foresee that somebody, for example, might be upset about their dog dying, and that is cognitive empathy. It's knowing how someone might feel emotionally in terms of, or react or respond to anything. Whereas relative empathy is being able to feel what someone feels. It's being attuned, which is what we're talking about in the parentification. Empathy is about the relative empathy, and that parentification will increase the relative empathy by a huge amount. So the child then might be considered over emotional, which is awful, because they're so empathetic. They see someone else cry and they cry, and we all do that at times, but it's uncontainable and really difficult for a child to handle. So I think that's it really. Did we talk about enabling parent? I did briefly touch on it. The enabling parent, when the narcissist is married, or if they're, as I said earlier, two narcissists and a parent, they will enable each other, or they will end up hating each other and then separate. But the enabling parent is one who is not narcissistic, but they collude with the narcissist to facilitate and enable the behaviour. So enabling, we see normally as part of an addiction kind of behaviour around families, but it's essentially around codependency. And a codependent is somebody who is dependent on another person to fulfill their need, to be needed. And narcissists you hook those people in by when we go back to the abuse cycle, by idealizing them, telling them how brilliant they are and how much they need it. So codependency is needing to be needed, and narcissists love codependence because they tell them how much they need them, and that hooks them in and keeps them colluded with the behaviour. Does that make sense? So, I don't know if there's any quick questions, just type them in. I think there's a bit of delay on the comments coming up for me and my the way I'm going, but I, you know, if you, sorry, oh, I can't speak, lost my ability. If you, as I'm speaking now, I think you've got a bit of a delay. So if you've got any questions, if you pop them in now, yeah, I'll get around, I'll answer what I can. Basically, we are looking at a narcissistic abuse system, which is really insidious. It's long game stuff, it's not quick. So the difficulty, because it's emotional rather than physical abuse, is putting your finger on it and being able to say, do you know what, this isn't right, I don't feel right. It's because we're certainly with a narcissist, when we have the idealization, devaluing, discard cycle, in the idealization phase, you're so hooked in, they basically use your hormones against you. So when we are in the love phase of a relationship, the falling in love and the intensity bit of a initial relationship, the hormone that we have, I think it's oxytocin, dopamine, one of those, it triggers that. And so this is how they trauma bond you. We talked about trauma bonding before. They trauma bond you with the idealizing, because they throw it all at you, tell you how wonderful you are, and then they snap it away. And when they do that, we go furthermore trying to get it back. We're trying to get back that idealization. And so then they give a little bit back, and then they take it away. They give it back and take it away and give it back. And that's why you get so hooked into narcissistic relationships. But it's done so well and so cleverly that it's really hard to spot it happening. You just think it's a blip or it's happened once. But when you start sitting down and thinking, hang on, for 5 days now, he said something nasty or she said something nasty to me. So when we are in that situation, when there's the devaluing, the kind of trauma bonding stuff going on, the only way we can do is just be aware. And it's really hard if you're not used to it, if you don't even know what it is. It's really hard to not fall victim to it. And you know, it's one of those things about boundaries again, recognizing that actually it's not okay that they speak to me like that, and it's happened too many times and I'm done. And being boundaried and saying, you know, because of the beginning was so addictive and lovely that we don't want to give that up, but actually that's long gone and it's not coming back unless you break contact. There lots of time passes and then they make contact because they're trying to hoover you back in. So make sense? I think that's probably about all I've got to say about it. Yeah, trauma bonding is dreadful for a child and then an adult, because it's so hard. If your parent has trauma bonded you, it's dreadful, and it's really hard not to want the love, because that's all anybody wants, isn't it? All everybody wants is to love or be loved and be accepted. And when we're trying to repair those relationships, it's really hard not to imagine what it could be like. Especially when we've had some distance from the abuse, it's really hard not to get sucked back in, because we are desperately trying to write the scripts of abuse, I guess. Well, there you go, you guys. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go and have a chilled afternoon, and I don't know, I might not do one next week just because I want to try and finish this flipping dissertation draft and get it in. So you may or may not see me, but I might do another little blog anyway. Oh no, I wanted to do one on attachment a bit more, because I was going to talk to you all about attachment and, what's it called? The effects of attachment. I wanted to talk about attachment and food and stuff like that. So maybe I'm going to do something about that, but I don't know if I'm going to have time. So let's see what happens. I will let you know. Otherwise I might just do a little blog for you, because that's been a while. Have a great weekend, everyone. Look after yourselves, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you soon. Take care. Thanks. Bye.